All right, welcome to the 2024 Budget Workshop sessions. Last week, I submitted for your consideration the proposed 2024 tentative budget, which serves as a starting point in the full budgeting process. The 2024 tentative budget does not utilize short-term borrowing and keeps our residential taxes flat. This evening, we will begin the workshop with a presentation from our town comptroller, Beth Greenwood, and she will provide an overview of the budgeting process as well as relevant information as it pertains to the tentative budget. I'm happy to share that the 2024 tentative budget includes the following: 2 new police officers and the promotion of an additional sergeant to support creating a traffic division. And this funding would increase our police department to 32 police officers. It also includes 1 new assistant community programs director and 1 additional grounds worker position in the Highway, Transportation, and Parks Department to support our youth recreational sports programming and field maintenance. This budget invests in our workforce by honoring contractually obligated salary increases for represented labor, as well as cost of living, grade, and step increases for non-represented labor. It includes all capital expenditures for equipment and vehicles within the budget to avoid bonding. It reflects payoffs of bond anticipation notes from 2019 that cannot be rolled again, where the alternative would be moving the debt to a long-term bond. The budget transfers fund balance to support revenues and keep the residential tax rate flat, essentially returning tax money to our residents. It reflects significant increased fees for healthcare and retirement costs, as well as higher costs for chemicals, equipment, fuel, electricity, and such across departments. New this year is our budget process is making sure to include matching funds for grants we have submitted, like the Climate Smart Community Grant, as well as water infrastructure grant that will be submitted next year. Some other highlights. This budget is building upon our 2023 bipartisan budget, which did not raise taxes, it eliminated short-term borrowing, and it also paid down short-term debt. We invested in important policies like body-worn cameras and other technology and training for our police officers. We brought the organic waste processing online to lower energy costs, generate revenue, reduce carbon footprint, and eventually achieve a net zero status. We have brought extensive improvements to our town parks by optimizing grants, continued the paving of our streets that are in need in town. We've continued to deliver excellent community programming for all of our residents, from our youth to our seniors. And we received over $900,000 in grant funds that have been used for infrastructure improvements, community programming, environmental studies, and public safety. At the conclusion of our budget workshop, the town board will consider possible courses of action for the preliminary budget. And now I will give the floor to our town comptroller, Beth Greenwood.
All right, good afternoon. Okay, just to go over a quick review of the process that was used to develop the tentative budget. Our office compiled 5 years of actual costs for all the budget lines, both expenditures and revenues, and then developed recommendations for each line based on what we were seeing. We met with each of the department heads and reviewed the recommendations we had made for their lines, had conversations discussing the work they plan to do in 2024, and then adjusted the lines to fit a combination of what we've seen historically and what they plan to work on. Once that information was completed, we compiled it and presented it to the supervisor. She made some initial adjustments, decreasing some expenditures, and then adding fund balance to support the revenue line and keep the tax rate flat. These tentative budget workshops are the opportunity for all of the department heads to present their accomplishments for 2023 and discuss the work they plan to do in 2024 to build on those. It also allows them the opportunity to request any adjustments to their section of the budget. It allows the board members to ask questions about each of the departments and what they're doing, and it allows the public to listen throughout the process to better understand the work that's going on throughout the town. Following these workshops, the tentative budget is revised to become the preliminary budget. This is our budget workshop schedule. So tonight we have, after the overview, we have the town attorney, we have the police department, the assessor, and the justice courts. The second workshop will be next Tuesday. It'll start at 10 in the morning. It will include planning and zoning, highway and parks, the town clerk, and the receiver of taxes. And the third workshop will be next Wednesday, the 11th, from 4 to 7, which will cover the recreation department, public works, central data processing, and then a discussion of revenues and anything else that's left over at that point. Following along to what the supervisor said, this tentative budget reflects a 0.34% tax increase, so basically flat across residential properties. It maintains all town services at current levels and does not incur any debt, either short or long term. It does use $2.375 million of fund balance, predominantly from the general fund, to ensure that the revenue is supported. It invests in the town workforce, as the supervisor mentioned, creating a traffic division, supporting youth recreational programming, and honoring obligated salary increases for our union labor. It also includes a cost of living, as well as the usual grade and step increases for the non-represented labor. This budget does contain the money identified for grant matches for the following year. It increases funding for sidewalks and ongoing ADA compliance, continues to support human resources for the workforce, and it provides stipends to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee and the Town Logo Working Group to continue the work that they're currently doing. Just a little bit of perspective for the salaries. We took the actual salaries for 21 and 22, what was budgeted for 23, and then you can see how that compares to what we've got in the tentative budget for 2024. Despite adding the positions, you can see that 24 is falling off just a little bit. We've had some senior people retire from the town, and as we hire in newer folks, they're a little bit less expensive. It's given us a little bit additional flexibility with the salary lines. With regard to the salary increases, over the course of the last 2 years, most of the contracts have been renegotiated. The most recent one was the water and sewer contract. I know that one will stand out at 5%. There's a reason for that. During the negotiation process, the town recognized that our salary schedule had fallen considerably behind those of surrounding municipalities. We were losing good, qualified, licensed operators from our plants to adjacent municipalities. They were basically being poached. So the salary adjustment was made to catch us up to the neighboring municipalities and recognize the value of our team. We also saw this year unexpected increases in retirement. Both ERS and the PFRS, they made the choice to increase, they based the retirement costs on a percentage of our payroll. They increased those percentages. We were not anticipating that. So that was additional costs that we would not normally have expected. Our healthcare this year, initial conversations, we were expecting nearly 10%. We were able to negotiate that down to just under 6%. So I was very pleased with that. Part of the reason why we had swapped brokers, and that's working out very well for us at this point. All right, this is the revenue support to the budget that we've had over the last several years. I kind of stretched this out a little bit because with COVID in there, we've got a little bit of some things that look funny. So that pushing it back as far as 2019, you can see that there was, rather than putting the capital expenses in the budget at that point, they were being bonded for. Remember, at that point, interest rates were below 0.5%. So it was basically a really good way to spend money wisely without having to pay a lot of interest on it as it was rolled. That moved some of the expenses out of the budget and allowed flexibility for other things at that point in time. During 21 and 22, you'll see the asterisk. That was when we had ARPA funding available. So that kind of supported the revenue stream. And there wasn't the need to use the rolling bands at that point. And as you recall, the spring of 22, this board had inherited a budget that had been previously made with an intention of the prior administration to bond for about $2 million worth of capital expenditures. We did end up bonding for some things in the water and sewer, but the board elected to use some fund balance to support the requested general and highway fund expenditures in that year. But it was outside of the budget, and those were done by resolution. So 23, last year's budget, we did use $2.3 million of fund balance to support the revenue stream, and this year we're a little bit more than that. Which brings us to the question of what has our fund balance looked like at the end of the year for the last several years. You can see this has varied up and down a bit, but it's certainly a healthy fund balance for what our expenditures actually look like. The Office of the State Comptroller recommends that fund balance should be a reasonable amount. They do not then define reasonable. However, they do use examples of either 15% or roughly 2 months worth of expenses when they talk about reasonable. For the town of Niskayuna, 2 months of expenses in the general fund would be about just over 2.4 million. You can see that we're very healthy and have plenty more than that. And for highway would be about 800,000. So we carry more than what the Office of the State Comptroller considers reasonable fund balance with our funds, and we'll be well over that at the end of 2023. So using this fund balance will not put us in any jeopardy in terms of where we should be. So the budget does not include, the budget does not include any new debt for 2024. We are paying off any of the short-term debt that was taken out back in 2019 across all the funds. That was a little bit over 1.3 million. We will be continuing to roll the short-term debt, those bond anticipation notes from 2020 through 2022, and we continue to pay for our long-term bonded debt, those obligations. Just to put it on everyone's radar, the debt that was taken out in 2020 comes due next year. That'll be just over 1.6 million across all the funds. And then it starts tapering down in 21 to 1.1. And then down in the 2022 was taken out was only about 630,000. So each year as we roll those, we're having less to pay off. And then we won't have any because there was nothing taken out in 23. So we're moving away from carrying that balance that we're rolling over, and we're moving into holding it in the budget where we're covering our costs as we incur them. That makes particular sense right now with the interest rates as high as they are. We don't want to be taking out any debt with high interest rates. Okay, so our tax base here in town, you can see the non-homestead, which is the business value, is roughly about 20% of the total value of the tax base. That's been seeing a slight decrease year on year. The homestead or the residential value has been seeing a slight increase, but overall the total valuation is relatively flat over time. Makes sense, the town is nearly built out. The tax rate over time has also remained relatively flat. The homestead, you can see, has remained quite flat. The non-homestead has increased slightly, but that's because the valuation of that portion of the tax base has decreased slightly. So obviously those two are inversely related. The next step is the preliminary budget. So the preliminary budget, once we're finished with these workshops and we get to that point, it will be filed and then be presented for the public hearing at the end of the month. That'll allow the public to ask questions. It'll allow the board to make any further adjustments that they feel suitable. At that point, they may still continue with the options to cut any services, to decrease expenditures, use fund balance in more or less amounts, or use bond anticipation notes to support revenue or increase taxes. Following the public hearing, the preliminary budget gets revised, and then we'll go to resolution to become the adopted budget for the year. And that is all I have. Are there any questions?
So is this, I can ask any of the questions I want, or are you going to be coming before us at another time?
I'll be back at the very end, and I'll be sitting beside all the department heads as they go through their portions of the budget in case they need anything.
All right, just a couple quick questions then.
Sure.
Let's talk about the grant matching funds. Is that a first for us doing that, including them in our operating budget before receiving the grants?
We did that a small amount last year because we had, actually for the clerk's office, they were thinking they might be doing the, I can't think of the name of the grant, but the storage grant for all the
Right.
record storage. They did not end up applying for that grant, so we did not end up using that, but we had actually thought we were going to do that last year. That's the first time we had done it. This year, the two that we actually funded the match for were quite large, considerable grants. But if we don't get the grants, the monies are still in places where they could be used without the grant to still do work that would make sense.
Right.
So-
But we've got a lot in there this year for grant matching.
We do have quite a considerable amount.
And in your opinion, does that make our applications stronger when we're trying to apply for grants by saying that we've already committed money to these particular projects?
I believe it does. It shows the intentionality of the town to do that work. If you're literally putting your money where your mouth is. I mean, you can always put on a grant that you can use fund balance, and if you have sufficient fund balance to do that, that is a reasonable match as well. But I think intentionally budgeting shows that you're very much intending to do that work.
Right. I would agree with that wholeheartedly, right? It really shows that you're ready and willing and able to
Absolutely.
get those grants. Go back a little bit on the retirement contributions with
Yes.
investments, contribution and investments, and just a little bit about how the state does that, if you will. And sometimes I know that in the past when the market wasn't too good, municipalities were then having to increase their contributions into retirement programs.
Yep, and that is, oh, sorry, I'm trying to see there it is. Okay. Yeah, that is something that we have zero control over. That is simply handed down from the state retirement system. We're never quite sure what they're going to do, quite frankly. We got 3 different sets of projected possible bills over the last couple months from the state retirement system, so I don't think they were completely sure what they were going to do with it either. And this is where it finally ended up. They base what we need to pay based on what they're seeing with their investments. And right now, I'm sure everybody is quite aware, the market has been not as bullish as people might like, I guess, for lack of a better description. So they're concerned, and they want the municipalities to put more in to ensure that we can meet our obligations to our retirees over time. So.
Right. Okay, thank you. One more question. I'm glad you put the graph up there about the fund balance, because I know there'll probably be a lot of talk about that and the fund balance that the town has. And when you show it up there on the graph, it's easier, I think, for people to see it, right?
Yeah.
Although we've been using money from the fund balance, we still maintain very healthy fund balance. And it's kind of been the intention, if you will, over the time that I've been here, right? At least in the last 3 years, that the board kind of felt we needed to start to use some of those funds. And I think a wise way to use them, as you said, Supervisor, is to pay off some of these bans and other things rather than going out and borrowing money. We have money that we can use to pay those off. And that is a smart use of our fund balance while keeping it at a very good level. So I'm glad you showed that graph. I think that's very helpful.
All right.
That's all I got for right now.
All right, I'll shut this off and
Any
get
questions?
started.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, I believe we're starting with our town attorney.
So mine's pretty straightforward. There's just a few lines there, and if you look at the lines, you can see that we're essentially keeping everything the same with respect to this last year. I'm under budget, I believe, for every single thing except for our Westlaw account, which is the legal research that increases every year. So we factored that in, and you'll see a bump up with that line for that. But I believe everything else essentially remains the same. You have a question, Phil?
I do, Elena, you know, I do have a question. So I do see that things are pretty flat. So you and I have had conversations about the workload for yourself and then, you know, hiring out some of the work when you need to and that sort of thing. So I guess are you comfortable with what we have in here for doing that?
So it will appear as though I believe that it's essentially the same, but there's also a portion of the general fund where there's salary monies that are allocated. So I have requested and spoken with the supervisor about increasing my salary line to be more in line with what the department heads are making. I think I'm the lowest paid department head in the town and require an advanced degree and a lot of out of office hours. So that is reflected in the budget as a whole. We've had discussions about, you know, I've put job postings out there for the position. I think I only had one person who initially indicated interest, and after speaking and explaining the position, he decided that his experience just wasn't the right fit. He had no background in anything that I had explained. So unfortunately that fell through. And so it's been a couple of years without being able to find somebody for that position. I do utilize Rob Hess on a rare occasion. This last month in September, it was a busier month for me, so I did utilize him a little bit more. But even then, I mean, I think we're still I think $12,000 is what's budgeted for outside counsel right now. And I use Rob and I use outside counsel for the ethics board. But as far as I know, we haven't really received too many legal bills for the ethics board portion of the outside counsel fees. So I'm staying well within what's budgeted for, but obviously I'm doing a lot of work myself, both during regular 9 to 5 hours and after hours.
So do you think you'll try to continue to pursue finding someone possibly part-time?
Possibly part-time. I know that I've even considered reaching out to the school to see if I can get maybe even a paid intern that might be able to help with some of the things. And then, you know, like I said, I've been trying to utilize Rob a little bit more since I have remained under budget to just help with certain things when maybe I could say yes, but it's why add extra on when I'm already working as much as I am. So that's the plan right now, but I would like to continue to pursue. Obviously, if something would come up, I'd like the option to be able to come back to the board and let you know that there's, you know, a possibility I could have somebody.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
All right, moving on to Police Chief Koshin.
Good afternoon. I'm going to be a little bit longer winded because I want to touch on some of the achievements in 2023 budget cycle for our police department. Before I do that, though, I want to begin by thanking our police department members for their hard work, dedication, and continued perseverance in the work they do day in and day out for our agency and our community. As I stand, I thought I was sitting today, before you today, I couldn't be prouder to be a part of our department because of our members and their efforts in helping us reach our accomplishments for 2023. So let's get into those accomplishments. The Niskayuna Police Department has been on a recruitment mission. Our agency has not stopped with its efforts to increase staffing back to pre-pandemic staffing levels through the continuous recruitment of both new and lateral transfers. The 2023 budget cycle has provided for our agency to hire 4 new police officers, bringing our agency to 28 sworn police officers. That's 8 new police officers since January of 2022. This achievement has allowed for our police department to continue to successfully work to meet the needs of the community, including the recent establishment of a traffic and community engagement division. This new division will further target quality of life and traffic concerns for our residents. as well as oversee our new bus patrol program, which is designed to utilize technologies installed on the school buses to hold violators accountable who pass school buses when picking up our students. Our recruitment does not stop here, and we're going to continue working towards filling our remaining vacancies in 2024. Also, another accomplishment was our agency worked to research and purchase new equipment to replace outdated equipment for our agency. The 2023 budget cycle provided financial support for our agency to purchase new batons, generators, life-saving AEDs, as well as provided for the purchase of helmets and shields to protect our police officers. We further were able to purchase 3 new police vehicles to replace patrol vehicles that were at the end of their life expectancy for our patrol division. The 2023 budget cycle has allowed for our police department to continue implementing the recommendations of the Niskuna Police Reform and Reinventive Collaborative Plan. I am proud to say that our new Lexipol policy manual is nearing completion with 1 policy left, and we will be applying through DCGS to begin the New York State accreditation process in the upcoming months. This is a big step for our agency in building towards furthering standardization, training, accountability, and transparency. Also, for the first time in the department's history, and with the support of this budget, 2023 budget, we created a partnership with SUNY Albany to fund an analyst position to assist with the creation of a community survey, a manpower study, and crime statistics analysis. Thank you, I want to say, to our analyst, James Hubble, for his collaborative work with our agency, and to SUNY Albany for supporting us with this. We look forward to collaborating again in the future. Lastly, this budget cycle has allowed for our department to further build community outreach programs, including our expansion of our Coffee with a Cop program, establishing our Cops and Kids reading program, and Niskuna Cares Vulnerable Persons Registry. This is just a short list of the many successes of our agency for 2023. I want to thank the town board for their continued support of our agency to help us achieve so much. Now looking ahead into 2024. Some of the highlights you're going to see in our proposed budget. This proposed budget will continue to fund and build department staffing. In this budget, there is funding for an additional 2 police officer positions and continued funding of a sergeant's position for the traffic division, bringing our agency to a total of 32 full-time police officers. When filled, these positions will provide the ability to enhance our patrol division as well as fully staff our traffic and community engagement division. The proposed budget will also continue to fund new equipment as well as replace outdated equipment. Our request for this budget cycle would replace outdated pistol sights and vehicle mounts for our weapons, continue to update radar equipment, provide funding for investigative technologies, provide new uniforms and gloves for our members, as well as allow for the department to continue purchasing vehicles on an annual rotational schedule. Lastly, this proposed budget would allow our department to continue our efforts to increase funding for the training of our agency. We continue to prioritize training, including career-enhancing training and the continuous education for our members. Thank you to the town board for your considerations of our proposed budgets. And now, if you would like to ask me questions, I am available for that. Bill?
Oh, don't worry, I got questions. Okay, so you talked a little bit about the radar signs and things like that. Is that on this line, traffic control down here?
That's not that line. The traffic control line is more specific to the signage the highway department puts up
Okay,
and electricity and things of that nature.
so tell me about the speed radar signs. We're purchasing them through highway, is that right?
Which speed
The
radar signs?
ones that were moving around town and.
So those
sort
were
of
originally, I
signs.
believe, done through some sort of a grant, and the county assisted with purchasing those. I'm not for certain the exact, because that was previous to me. What we did while I was here as the chief of police was we transitioned those signs into trailers that we did with the Niskuna Community Foundation. Thank you to them for providing funding for those trailers that we're now moving on a more real-time basis.
Right, I do. I have seen those out and about town.
However, we are looking, part of the 2000 equipment line, one of the things that we had proposed in that line, depending on how we prioritize the funding in that line, was to look into potentially sort of a billboard radar sign. So something similar to what the Water and Sewer and Highway Department has, where it's a public display message, but it also is collecting data. Recently, DCGS came out with a grant with some funding for some different technologies, and we're looking to see if that would be able to also house potentially an LPR system, and we could kind of package that together and use grant funds to support that versus potentially this funding that's proposed.
Okay. On your vehicle line, vehicle purchase, that in 23 was 165 and now is 120.
That's correct. So the cost of vehicles has obviously gone up. However, unfortunately for us, one of our engines blew up this year. Fortunately for us, it was prior to the expiration of the warranty. So in speaking with the comptroller, we thought that we could run that patrol vehicle a little bit longer because it does have a new warranted engine inside of it. So that funding would provide for 2 new police vehicles with an estimated increase of 8% on that equipment.
Good, good. I'm glad to see those in the budget and as an expense and not as something that we're bonding, which I've been an advocate for a long time. So that's good. This is something I don't know if Frank or Beth can answer this. On the printed budget that we have over in the right-hand column, there's a number of 77,603. It's on a couple of, not just that particular page, but on some other pages.
Increases or decreases from the prior year. So that's an increase.
So that's
Personal services increase.
That's for this page here. Okay. And then another page, it might be a little different. So, and getting back to the, your staffing, you've done a great job. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
We had a lot, it was very hard times for law enforcement agencies
Nationwide.
nationwide, but you've done a good job getting our staffing up and continuing to do
We.
that.
Including my agency. I always like to use the word we.
Yes,
I'm
I'm
telling you right now, that's why I started by thanking them. The hard work that they do, it's a team effort. And yes, I agree with you. We have collectively done an
your
excellent job.
department's done a great job and it's taken time. And
It has.
this is what I try to explain to the town residents when they ask about that, well, why don't we have this and why don't we have that? And we're bringing back the traffic division and these things. And I explained to them that all municipalities have had trouble with their law enforcement staffing. Now we're getting ahead. We're doing better than most probably, I would think.
We're moving in the right direction.
Moving in the right direction. That's good. And we're continuing to do that and keeping that in the budget.
Yes.
That's important. That's important.
Staffing is paramount, especially because, we do have folks that can begin retiring here shortly. And,
Just when you get it up there.
we have 2 members
Just when you
that can
get it up.
retire in January,
Right.
if they wanted to. And I think that it's imperative that we keep just moving forward, getting people in the academy, having people ready to go, sort of next person up mentality to get them, on the road and get them rocking and rolling. So
Because as you know, you get a retirement or you get an injury and then their numbers are down and that's tough.
Yeah.
That's all the questions I have.
I just have one question, Chief.
Yeah.
I'll start by echoing Councilmember McFarland's remarks. I think what you and Lieutenant Twitty or Deputy Chief Twitty and the board has done with staffing is incredible this year or over the last couple of years. I don't ever remember a time when this many officers was hired. So it's incredible. And to see that there's money budgeted to hire an additional 2 and the possible creation of a traffic division, I think is excellent. Also, with no longer bonding for the vehicles, that's a huge step. We had a lot of conversations about how the bonds were far outliving the life expectancy of the vehicles, and it didn't make sense. So it's great to move away from that. I just have one question, though. Moving to page 18 under revenues,
one second for you.
the 1520 line, police fees from alarms.
You want us to tell you want us- Yep.
Can you just speak briefly to how that revenue is generated and what exactly it is?
For the alarm fees?
Yes.
So historically speaking, the town has set fee rates for individual homes as well as commercial businesses to notify us and keep us on record as having an alarm system for that entity. There is basically a grace of a set amount of alarm activations that comes along with that fee. And I believe it's 3 prior to there being any increased increment of cost to the individual or to that entity. It's a good thing to have because even though I know there has been discussion in the past on the fact that, alarms are sort of outsourced and they don't come directly into our police department.
Mhm.
But I think one of the things that's being missed is, if someone was not to register alarm with us every single time we would go respond there, if we were to do a pay as play kind of mentality, the set rate would very quickly exceed within, I don't remember the exact amount per activation as to what it is, but the grace period of 3, it far outweighs and benefits the individual versus not registering the alarm based on the fee schedule.
So this 67,000 in generated revenue then is based on in excess of 3 false alarms? Is that?
No, that's going to be the historical averages for how many alarms that we would have had. Beth can speak to that probably better than I can. It's more historical averages towards how many folks we have or entities we have that are registering their alarms, right? Or not, and then being charged. That's something the comptroller's office would work on, those specific numbers.
Okay. I guess my concern, or not necessarily concern, but question is, we heard a couple times throughout the year as a board about historically alarms were monitored here at the police department. And there was a ton of work that went into that. Somebody had to be staffed to monitor the alarms, to upkeep the data and the records accurate. With the creation of the UCC, those alarms were then monitored by the UCC, and now the UCC doesn't monitor them anymore. So residents are essentially paying, I guess, an administrative fee for alarm monitoring, but then they're also paying their alarm monitoring company. So it's almost like they're paying twice.
They are, however, they're also getting 3 false activations a year without being charged, because it does cost. There is
Absolutely.
an assessed cost to having that service, which they're opting into having. And I have no opinion one way or another, but I try to explain to the folks that come to me, and I'm like, listen, I completely empathize and sympathize with what you're saying. It is completely different than it once was. However, by registering your alarm, you're guaranteeing in a fiscal year that the first 3 activations you're not being charged for. If you choose not to do that, you are going to be charged for each of those activations. And it also is a part of town code, I believe, that you have to as well. So I'd have to look into it further, but I think there would actually have to be
Yeah. So
an amendment to town code.
yeah, I think it is in town code that when you have the alarm installed, obviously you need a building permit and you're paying a fee for that.
Correct.
I mean, I don't know if it's maybe a discussion for the board to have collaboratively as we work through the budget process, or for, a discussion down the road about maybe moving to a system where we would charge after 3 false alarms. So if somebody, if their alarm is activated accidentally 3 times throughout the year, okay, that's their grace period. The 4th time, there's a fee, because obviously it's tying up our resources and putting wear and tear on our vehicles and equipment.
There is a fee, I believe, after 3.
There is, whether you're registered or not. I think what Councilmember Moskowitz
He's
is
saying
suggesting, I don't
no
want to speak,
fee
is no
until
fee.
you
And
reach
then after
3.
Correct. Yeah. So and I know this is a huge revenue source that we would have to look at, obviously, as a board collaboratively. But to eliminate the fee for registering an alarm, I mean, you're paying whoever your alarm monitoring company may be, you pay them monthly. The town receives revenue through the building permit when the alarm is installed. So to sort of cut back on that annual fee, but then still charge a fee for false alarms.
I will also suggest to you, though, that with the way the town code was originally written, it was with the intention of the current technology that exists. There are a lot of folks that have alarm systems that are not with a building permit,
Absolutely.
because you can just buy it online and put it in yourself, right? So there is not this double charging for residential that I think you were speaking to.
Yeah, no, I think the double charging, or not even necessarily double charging, but the additional fee I was referring to was we're paying the town whatever the fee may be. Is it $50 or $70 a year for the alarm? But then the residents are also paying their alarm monitoring company a monthly or an annual fee. So they're double paying. We may not be receiving double income, but our residents are double paying.
I remember last year, at some point we had this conversation. I ran some rough numbers regarding what the estimated cost of the resource for us to be sent out as a police entity to respond to these, because they're traditionally 2-person calls if it's a burglar alarm.
Yep.
And I can tell you with certainty, if we were to run those numbers again, it's a substantial amount of money from an actual resource payment standpoint. Again, that's not to dissuade anybody. I'm just being transparent. It was, Beth, were you part of that conversation? It was in excess of $50,000 a year that I recall, if you were to quantify our responses. Something in the, maybe I'd have to look back. I don't want to misspeak.
Either way,
but I know it was
significant number.
tens of thousands of dollars if you were to take hourly rates, vehicle wear and tear, time, all the above. And again, I have no stake in the game, but I'm just putting that out there to be transparent that it's a very expensive thing to respond to alarms, so.
When we have people register for their alarm and they pay the fee, we keep that information in the data, correct?
Yes, Chris O'Brien, the executive secretary, she's the one that manages all of that.
Right. So to your point, and I understand what you're saying
Mm-hmm.
about the monitoring, but not all people do have their alarms monitored. So maybe they have their alarm registered with us and the alarm goes off, right? And the neighbors call. And then we respond, right? Well, we didn't get the call from the dispatch center. We got the call from, well, we did, but it wasn't because their alarm
It
was
didn't come
being
to them
monitored.
from ADT or,
It was
Right.
called in because of neighbor, because of the horns going off and making all kinds of noise and stuff like that. So I think, and correct me if I'm not right, then we have the information when a person registers their alarm, right?
Certainly.
With contact information. So if it continues to go off, they can go look for that information and try and get a hold of that property owner.
Yeah.
If we don't have
That's-
them register and we charge a fee for that, it's much like a dog license fee and other fees that, we have in town.
that's a great point. I mean, I know from my experience at the UCC, there were several times where we would get calls from a neighbor who said, hey, my neighbor's burglar alarm has been going off for hours. No one's here. And we weren't aware of it because there was no alarm monitoring company. What about a model or a system where if somebody chose to have an alarm monitoring company, then they paid their annual fee. If they don't, then the town offers a system where we won't necessarily monitor your alarm, but keep track of your records. We'll have your key holders on file. We'll have contact information and then charge for that service. So we're not necessarily charging them we're not charging them to maintain those records unless they need us to. If they're not willing to use a third-party vendor, then we'll maintain their records. Does that make sense?
Again, I think the only thing that I would say before we go any deeper into the discussion is really we need to identify what town code says, because I don't think we can do a whole lot unless we're looking to amend that specific to that. Because I do believe it's in there, specific to this.
So maybe then taking a look at town code and then having this discussion further throughout
Yeah.
the budget process is the best course of action.
I don't know. That's just theoretically, though, doing a timeline. We're in October. You have to call for a public hearing.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
not
I'm just
necessarily the
thinking
whole
about this,
process
but
in the
yeah,
next-
just the budget.
Not necessarily the entire process. in the
If
next-
we had to amend town code, I think we're on a kind of a short timeline to do that, to facilitate any sort of change in that section. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And I do think it's something worth maybe looking into, the fees. Obviously, fees are a revenue source, but is it necessary to be charging this fee? And if so, why? And what is the town providing for that fee? That's my concern. But again, we can look at town code and see exactly what it entails.
Just to clarify, is it it's a revenue source, but is it replacing the time and value and the expense of having two officers respond? Is it kind of balancing?
I need to
the
look.
service.
I need to look back
Yeah.
at the original numbers from last year, and we can run something again. We can run up a report again, but it certainly was. It was very close in proximity to not being a revenue.
Yeah,
It was-
the word revenue is misleading, I
Yes,
think, in this case.
Yes. But
Understood, but it's still a-
to that point, if Lowe's has their alarm go off every single night,
Absolutely.
right? And it's not everyone, that's a fair conversation, I think, to have. I don't know how that's not my world, right? That's,
Yeah, no, I guess we look at town code and see exactly what we can take into consideration here without having to amend the code and go from there.
Does anybody else have any other questions? No? Okay.
Thank you for
Thank you.
explaining that.
I hope I did a good job
You did. Thank you.
from explaining it, because I wasn't prepared for
Chief,
that specific question.
Could you revisit that analysis you ran or that was run previously for the public safety meeting tomorrow? Can we anticipate having that for next month?
For next month, yes. Probably not for tomorrow. I apologize.
No, I know I asked for the moon and the stars. Sometimes I don't get
I
that.
can probably have it by Monday
Okay,
is probably when I can have it done.
Okay,
And
that's
we can
good.
talk about it.
we could always have
Yeah.
follow-up
Can
conversations
we
in the
do that,
meantime.
Beth? Can you and
Absolutely.
Tom do that together? And rip through it? We'll rip through it. All right. We'll figure it out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
I'm reading code right now.
Is it?
I mean, I don't want to speak, but yeah. Okay. Oh,
We're way ahead.
okay. Which is okay. We have our town assessor up, Eric Amberger.
Well, as you heard, my name is Eric Amberger. I'm the town assessor. I'm responsible for a fair and equitable assessment role. About my office, we have a staff of 3, me, an aide, and a clerk. My office, we maintain records, both electronic and physical media, of all the current property owners, property transfers, of course, the assessments, lot sizes and other data on the lots, school districts, special districts. We help maintain tax maps on all properties in town. During the normal course of business, we interact with almost every department in town. I think I don't deal with the recreation, but after that, everybody's going to see me at one point or another. We spend a lot of time assisting taxpayers. It's whether it be doing estimated taxes for their closing or helping them with their exemptions. We actually spend a lot of time on exemptions. Of course, I maintain the assessment rolls. In fact, it's about the assessment rolls. You saw a little bit before with Beth, but it lists every property in town. And it's part of the computation to apportion taxes and calculate property tax bills. It contains over 8,700 properties. There's over 3.1 billion in assessed value. And that's 3.9 billion in market value. And out of that assessed value, over 2.5 billion is taxable value. Some responsibilities for my office. I had to take 280 hours of education to even be qualified for the position. And every year I have to take 12 hours of continuing ed. Whenever education opportunities come up, doesn't qualify as continuing ed, I take them. Involves, Jordan had the CRACE and other things come up with the assessor associations. It's my job to value every property in town. Me and my office, we analyze and validate sales as reported by the county clerk. I spend a lot of time conducting field review, following up on building permits, validating, verifying sales, and lots of other things that pop up that force me to go out into the field. I respond to FOIL requests, and I'm the person who processes the tentative and final assessment rolls. That's where we calculate and declare an equalization rate for the town. Of course, it involves valuing all the properties, updating all the exemptions. And of course, through all that work, there's a lot of quality control that goes into every step. I get data, I look at it, I get the data ready to load into the software, the RPS software for the town. I'm sorry, for the assessor. That's the assessor software that we use. And once it gets loaded in, make sure it's loaded in right. So I create the assessment rolls, I file them with the town clerk. And of course, being the assessor, I also share data with a lot of other people, includes the controller, the county, New York State, our school districts, various town departments. I sign an oath for the roll. I publish it on our website, and I maintain physical copies in our office. Also have supporting documents that go with the assessment roll, just as a tools for homeowners in town. A residential inventory report that says, this is your house, this is the size of the house, this is what it's assessed at. It helps homeowners know where they stand. I think open government is very important. And also sales reports, and those are on also, there's a physical copy in my office, and it's on my website. As I like telling homeowners all the time, what I publish on the website started its life as an Excel spreadsheet. You can download it off the website, and there's programs out there that'll put it back into an Excel spreadsheet. Have fun with it. You can look at it, you can search it, you can sort it, you can find what's relevant to you. As I alluded to a little bit before, we do a lot of time with exemption administration. That means approving new exemptions and renewals. Sometimes this means knocking on people's doors for renewals. They're senior citizens and disabled people. They're going to see my smiling face. And the conversation is, you have to give me something. Otherwise, I'm going to have to take away your benefit for the next year. Please don't make me do that. For the town, there's over 1,300 exemptions. There's over 5,000 exemptions for the town, school, county. That doesn't include 3,500 star exemptions and an additional 2,200 star credits. Technically, they're administered by the state, but somehow me and my office spend a lot of time dealing with star credits. If I have to, just homeowners just have a hard time navigating the bureaucracy, I'll bring them into my office. Let's call the state together. I know what questions to ask. I know how to interpret what they're saying. Let's fix this. Something else my office does once a year, we have grievance day. Okay, and we prepare for it. I meet with property owners prior to grievance day. Let them have a chance to explain maybe why they feel they're overassessed, or if nothing else, help them navigate the bureaucracy. I don't want anybody to be intimidated by a form and not get their day in court. We make changes as directed by the Board of Assessment Review, and we mail all the decision letters for all the complainants. As you've seen me here before, I also calculate base proportions for the town. That's where we apportion taxes between the residential and commercial properties in town. I administer all our pilots. That means getting the contracts in, typically from Metroplex, reading it over, double checking it. A couple times I've kicked back contracts just because they weren't right. Math is math, and if it doesn't add up, tell me what's right. I set up the work files for the pilots, track it over their lifespan. We update them every year, add, delete as necessary. I track lost revenue. I'm the person that does that calculation to figure out how much revenue we lose every year because we have a pilot in town. And of course, this involves a lot of coordinating with the comptroller, Schenectady County, the schools, the fire districts, New York State. And also after we do all the processing for the pilots, I'm the person that creates and mails all the bills. And again, every step of this process, there's quality control involved. Making sure multiple sets of eyes on it, doing the math, checking the spelling, making sure it's right. I'm the person who runs the tax rolls, both for the schools in September and the town and county in January. As you can imagine, there's a lot of coordination with the schools. Again, the usual people, the schools, the state, the comptroller, receiver of taxes, fire districts, school districts. I get, especially with the town and county tax rolls, I get a lot of data from various sources. And I have to make sure that data is turned into a file that can be put into RPS, our assessing software. I run the reports. I make sure they're good to the best of my knowledge and ability. I have multiple sets of eyes on them to make sure they're good. And of course, these reports get shared with all the people I mentioned before. Once I run the extended tax rolls, I create PDFs of all the tax bills for everybody in town. So that comes from me also. And at that point, I hand off the tax bills to the receiver of taxes. Things we have to do in my department to get our jobs done. We have to know the real property tax law. I have to be familiar with income tax forms. I really have to know how to file someone else's taxes. You'd be surprised the questions that come up. After we have to be well-versed in estates, trusts, and wills, and especially how they may or may not affect current exemptions. And on more than a couple of occasions, we've had to go back to the owners and the attorneys and tell them they need to change the will so they can maintain their exemptions, whether it be the STAR, the senior citizen exemption, the veterans exemption. My office has, I have to deal with all sorts of various forms of technology. It's not just one. I have to know how to use a lot. There's a lot I have to figure out how to use on the fly. Google is my friend. And of course, the reports that I do it for everybody in town, everybody in town hall. People from the fire districts, the veterans organizations, community organizations, all look to my department for information. My goals for the next year, it's pretty simple, to continue serving the people of Niskayuna to the best of my ability and to maintain a fair and equitable assessment role. Anybody have any questions?
How are we doing, Eric? Good job. Good job. So let's talk a little bit. Actually, that was very good because, describing what you do, many people don't know that. And there's many, many aspects of your job, as you said. And I'm sure one thing you didn't mention is the number of phone calls that you field on a daily basis from people complaining, I'm sure, right? You're like the first line.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I got to call the tax assessor. My taxes are too high, right?
Yeah, I get calls about that. I get calls from other departments. People think that I'm in charge of the special districts for the parks. I deal with all that at one point or another, yeah.
Right, right. Well, I didn't realize, though, and I'm glad that you shared that you actually do go out to people's houses when they've got exemptions. And if you know that they are liable to lose that exemption and they haven't communicated with you, thank you for doing that.
For the disability exemption, I have a March 1st deadline. For the senior citizens, it's April 15th. I go out before then. I let them know. I mean, I can fill it out with the people right there at the moment. And even if they don't have all their documents together, just get it, sign it, put a date on it. Right now, it's officially filed. And if you're missing a document, well, give it to me tomorrow. I don't care. I don't want bureaucracy or any kind of rules to get in the way of people and their benefits. I want to be fair about it.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent because it can be complicated for people, and they do forget, and it's hard for them to fill some of these forms out. So that's great. How many grievances do you have per year?
It's been going down pretty steadily for the last few years. After the revals, I think we had like 500, and the last couple of years we've only had a couple dozen.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So that's a big decrease.
Yeah, and I've only have this year I only have 2 small claims where residential owners get denied and they take me to small claims court. And I have to sit in a hearing with the hearing officer and the owner. We have to each give our opinion of value on the property. That's me defending my values.
Right. And I'm sure you're doing very well.
I try.
I don't have any other questions.
I'd like to just thank you for going above and beyond.
Thanks.
You're not only technical, but your kindness and your, wanting to help people. That's just, it's really amazing. And we're very lucky to have you.
Thank you. People don't usually like seeing the assessor come around. So if I could do something that's in a different vein, I like doing that. So
Absolutely.
To that point, I think you and I ran into each other a few times in the parking lot throughout the last year, and you were running to your car and said, "Oh, I'm going to meet a resident on this street, or I'm going to explain the exemptions to this resident."
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I know you had a really busy year between the firefighters' tax exemptions and the. I know you spent some time down at the senior center talking about exemptions there. So thank you. Thank you for that.
firefighter tax exemption isn't done yet. We got the 2 schools have to approve it. And for a lot of property owners, it's not going to be a better benefit until they approve it. So we're working on that. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thank
you. I did text him.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm so-
You talked to one of their assessors, right? It's
Yeah.
like a huge sharing of information,
all the
right?
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some property owners that are pretty much homebound. So they take a little more hand-holding just because, want to do the right thing.
The court security was giving him a quick call. We're running so far ahead, I'm sure he's on his way.
Just a couple minutes ago.
Just Yeah. You want to pause or? You want to go ahead and pause while we're waiting? She's going to pause it.